Welcome back to another episode of the Remade Life Podcast. In this episode, I'm unraveling the identities that created the version of me that needed autoimmune disease. This episode is really special and it's a very vulnerable episode as I'm sharing some of the experiences and the belief patterns that all came together and worked together to create autoimmune, more specifically lupus. Let's talk about it. Hello. Okay, before we dive into this episode, I have to share I lost a little bit of momentum with the podcast this season due to some tech issues that I was having. I ran out of space on my computer, so I couldn't download my edited video and audio from my editing software, and then I needed like a different adapter cable to be able to transfer my files to an external hard drive. It was a whole thing. And usually I just leave my tech issues to my brother. So shout out to my brother if you're listening. But like, it wasn't just really like a tech issue. It was more of like a space issue on my computer, like a digital organization issue. I actually have a very difficult time with organization, especially digital organization. And growing up, I shared a room with my sister, and yeah, I was the messy sister. But I really like to think of it as creative freedom. I let all the like data bytes or whatever you call them just like fill up on my computer from all my other podcast episodes. But I finally got them all transferred onto an external hard drive and even had ChatGPT create an organization plan for my podcast episodes so that I make sure I keep plenty of space on my computer. 2026 will be my year of digital organization. So you heard it here first, people. All right, one more update. Matt and I are actually headed to Costa Rica next week, and I'm super excited. We will actually be in Costa Rica when this episode drops. So if you are listening to this, we are in Costa Rica. And actually, now that I think about it, when this episode drops, because I usually publish these on Mondays, it'll be my birthday. So if you're listening to this, happy birthday to me. And words of affirmation are my love language. So make sure you head on over to Instagram and find me. Send me a DM at daniela.spear. Wish me a happy birthday and let me know how much you love the Remade Life podcast. That would mean the world to me. Yeah, we're headed to Costa Rica, and I'm just so excited for this trip. We weren't sure if we'd be able to make this trip happen, but we made it work, and I'm so ready for the end of the year with a bit of relaxation and adventure. And I'll do my best to share our adventures on Instagram, so make sure you follow along again at daniela.spear. So this trip actually also marks the end of my time at my beloved orange office in downtown Durham. So no, the office is not literally orange, but where my office is located is the orange co-working space. I'm actually moving out at the end of this week, so in just a couple of days, and I am both so sad and also so excited because that means that our ADU project, I don't know if I mentioned this on any of the other episodes this season, but we have been in the process of building an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, like a little mini house in our backyard. I know I shared about it in my newsletter and on social media, but I don't know if I shared about it on the podcast. So we have been working with Quorum Houses in Durham, and we broke ground in September, and we have been the last couple of months, like in the midst of this huge construction project, and that space will be the new home for Remade Wellness. And I'm so thrilled. It's always been the dream to just have a space from home that's not like actually in my house, but like to have a studio that is a part of our house in some way. And I'm just excited. I'm excited to bring my work home, and I'm most excited that I never have to leave my house again. I'm just kidding. I will eventually leave my house. But yeah, it just has always been the dream, and it's finally happening. But of course, I can't move out without giving a proper goodbye to my sweet first office. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it behind me. I have loved this space. It's just been the perfect space to help me grow in my confidence as a practitioner, and to help me build my like clientele, and just to be a part of downtown Durham has been a truly unique and exciting experience. And one of the things that attracted me most to this space was that it just like is so cozy and cute, and the way it's like decorated, kind of like the shared spaces, like the lounge, the kitchenette, it just feels very homey. And that was the thing, is that like I didn't really want to leave my house, so I wanted to find an office that truly felt like home, and Orange Co-working Space was that space. And it's not super far from our house, so it was just perfect. And then the other thing that I really love about this space is when I first moved in here, their message, their motto is "You belong here." And I resonated with that so much, because when you have an autoimmune disease, there's like no specific doctor for autoimmune disease. Like you really just end up going to the specialist of whatever organ or body system is involved, or is most affected. And oftentimes you just end up like getting passed around to a lot of different doctors, and you just feel like you don't have like a home base for your health care. And so that is what I wanted this space to be. Not necessarily like your medical home, but I wanted it to be a very intentional space designed for those with autoimmune disease. A space where you can say and you can feel that you belong here, that your symptoms, your experiences, they matter, and that I believe you, because I too have gone through all of those things. So that's why this space has been so special. And I think that is why ultimately bringing my work home has felt so aligned, because I've always believed that the process of healing autoimmune disease is a process of coming home to yourself. And my husband and I have done a lot of work to put love and intention into our home. And I love my home. I love my house. I love it so much. And I just wanted my work to be an extension of that. But the studio here at Orange has been just the best starting point to create this business, to give me space to think about the bigger vision. It's been my launching pad and my creative space, and it just unexpectedly became my own healing space as well. And it just has been so cool to get to meet so many different people, and have them come through my doors, to share about their experiences, and to just like see healing happen, and to like experience it like with people in this space has been just so sweet. And I'm so glad that this was like my first massage therapy home. Yeah, and it's just I've loved getting to know some like the other workers here, and this space has been so special. So I'm glad that it was part of my experience, but I'm ready for the next chapter as well. All right, let's get into this episode. I think that maybe I have subconsciously been avoiding getting into this episode because it is such a very like vulnerable topic for me, and I honestly have no idea what's like really going to come out in this episode. But I know that this is necessary to talk about, because I know sharing the work that I'm personally doing will help a lot of you on your own healing journey from autoimmune disease, because it's like the part of healing that does not get talked about at the doctor's office. And honestly, my hope is that we can finally put away this old narrative of my body is attacking me, because what I want most for anyone with autoimmune disease is to know that no, autoimmune disease is not your body attacking you. It's actually a correct response to your environment. It's a created response out of your nervous system's innate need for survival. All of it, autoimmune disease, all of it is a protection pattern. Protecting you from what? Well, that part is your work. What I'm sharing in this episode is my work. These are layers that I have peeled back over several years. I think mostly over the last 3 to 4 years. And I think I'm just finally ready to share some of the behind the scenes emotions that I have worked through to heal the psychosomatic or the mind body part of autoimmune disease. These emotional layers have really been identities that I took on through my childhood and into my teenage years as a means of protection, and also as a result of not having the tools to navigate the strong emotions that I experienced as a child. And I want to preface all of this with everything I'm sharing is from my perspective, from my experience. This is not an attempt to call out or blame or fault anyone for my experiences as a child. This is me sharing how I experience things from the perspective of my nervous system as a child. Okay, so the first bit of this story does start with a trigger warning for suicidal ideation. So if that is particularly triggering to you, feel free to just skip ahead a couple minutes in this episode. So in 2022, I became incredibly depressed due to ongoing burnout at work. Let me back up real quick and just say that is not when I was diagnosed with autoimmune disease. So I was diagnosed with lupus back in 2008. 2022 is just more of the starting point for all of the psychosomatic work that I have done over the last several years. Okay, so at the time in 2022, I was really burnt out. I became depressed. I was working in a corporate wellness job, and I was working really early mornings and long days while also trying to build my business. And it just became a lot, and I became very cynical about everything. And it really created just a very unhappy environment for me, both in and outside of work. And I became so overwhelmed with my entire life that eventually I reached this point of there's only one way out of this. And I'm really thankful that I recognized that those thoughts early on were not good thoughts to be having, and I immediately got help. I went back to therapy, and I also made the decision to quit my job with the support of my husband. So I do recognize my privilege in having been able to do that, to have the financial support at home to leave my job. And I felt like I just needed to take time for myself to work through this depression that I was living in. But month by month went by, and I wasn't getting any better. And at this point, it was August. So I had quit my job, I think in May that year. And then by August, I was still really struggling with suicidal ideation. And so one morning, I just went outside to my deck and I sat down and I said, okay, God, what is it? What is it that I need to learn from all this? Because I'm doing all the therapy, I'm at home, I'm resting, but I still feel so exhausted and doesn't feel like anything's helping me. What do I need to do to heal from this? And I actually shared this in episode 2, rewriting my autoimmune narrative, though I don't think I shared about the suicidal ideation part. I did talk about the message that I heard from God that morning. So when I asked what do I need to do, immediately I heard God say, it's time to release your identity as a sick person and embrace your identity as a healer. And in that moment, I saw myself in a hospital bed, and I knew that that was me in high school when I was like first diagnosed with lupus nephritis and I was going through chemotherapy. But for the first time, like, I recognized her in a different light. I recognized that version of me, that she who is sick, was who I needed to be in order to get the love and validation that I needed. So the girl in the hospital bed, I saw her so differently. I realized that, like, I needed her. I needed to be her for so long to get the love and the validation that I felt I needed. And she helped give me a work ethic to accomplish so much through high school and college and my early adulthood. I definitely consider myself a high achiever. But she drove my nervous system to burnout time and time again. But it was so necessary because it was the only way that I felt I could get praise and approval from the people in my life. Like, I needed to perform. And I know, like, thinking logically about it, like, no, of course not. That's not the only way. But at that time, it was the belief that I had formed growing up based on how I got praise from my parents and my family. So, first, there's this belief that I needed to perform and achieve to get praise and positive attention. And second is that I needed to be sick to earn rest and care. So that version of me, she who is sick, was actually quite necessary for my survival. And again, I'm speaking from a nervous system perspective, not from a basic needs perspective. So yes, I had housing, food, physical safety, clothing, all of those things. But I did not have the emotional support that I needed as a child. And many times my emotions were deemed too much to deal with and were very inconvenient to my parents. So one of the parts of my story that I'm not quite ready to share is the specific dynamics between my family and I growing up, specifically my relationship with my mom. I can say that through my healing process, my relationship with her has become very strained because when I started recognizing those patterns that I developed in childhood and in my teenage years, and I started to speak up for myself about things that I had previously let slide, it wasn't well received. But recognizing those patterns as an adult, asking for change and not receiving change was actually quite helpful in validating what I experienced as a child. It was kind of like a validation of, like, yes, what I experienced was true. Yes, that really did happen. So my word for 2025 is trust. And I didn't anticipate learning trust in this way, but I actually really learned to trust myself and what my nervous system experienced. And I've now arrived at being the protector that I needed as a child. I don't want to give away too much of the ending here, but spoiler alert, I'm the hero. Just kidding. No, but really, like, you know, it's like that saying, like, be who you needed as a child. Like, through reflecting on what the word trust means, I expected, you know, I always set this, like, intention for my word and what I think I will, you know, grow to learn through the year. And every year it just, like, exceeds my expectations. And, like, this year I really thought that I would be able to just trust other people better, like, trust the process in my businesses, like, trust God on, like, financial needs. But, like, really I learned so much about trusting myself and trusting my experiences and trusting the feelings that I have around people and certain experiences. So that trust has been more internal, like, that growth has been internal because isn't that always how it happens? Like, we expect like these things in our life to change, but really what changes is like within us. But yes, okay, so through the process of unraveling these different layers through my journey of healing autoimmune disease, like, has helped me arrive at this better version of myself. And I think it's the version that I was always meant to be, and I think it's the version all of us are meant to be. It's when we finally stop believing the lies that we shape internally from the people and experiences in our environment, and we fully step into who God says that we are. And we become the version of ourselves that little us needed. And I am the protector that little Daniela needed. But before I could be that, I first had to survive. And I had to be she who is sick. I needed to have an autoimmune disease because it was how my body could get rest and care from the constant drive of overperforming in school and sports for praise and love. It's just all intertwined together. And I think another piece of that, like going back to believing the experiences that I had as a child, is the parallel between like how eruptive autoimmune disease is and how eruptive my emotions were as a kid. Like, a lot of the stories that I have heard about me as a baby were that I cried a lot. And so maybe I was just a natural crier, but I also know that I had to stuff down a lot of emotions because I didn't feel like they were allowed. And I would stuff them down so much that I would just eventually erupt with frustration and anger. And honestly, I think that becomes a learned response from the immune system, that eruption is how we get things done. Isn't that interesting? So this like overproduction, overdoing it, over responding, and erupting is the way that I learned to live. And I mean, the way that like my nervous system learned to respond to my environment, and it's the way that my immune system learned to respond to its environment. So there's a lot of parallels there. I mean, I think it's kind of cool to like look at it in that way. Okay, so going back to that morning on my deck, I saw myself in a different light. And for the first time, I was no longer angry about having lupus, but I really understood the need for it and like why it had been there all along. And in that moment, I was just swept with so much compassion for her, for myself, and for everything that I had lived through with lupus, like the pain, the chemotherapy, the exhaustion, being the chronically sick kid in school. And like all of that was a cry for help. And it was the only way that my body, that my nervous system knew to be seen and to be validated. And the internal pain that was like so often disregarded was like finally made valid in the physical pain and the physical dis-ease of lupus. And lupus made me valid, and I needed her. Like, I needed she who is sick. She helped save me. And at that moment, like, I released so much resentment for the experiences that I had because of lupus. And instead, my perspective completely changed. Like, I was truly grateful for it because I knew that it wasn't my body attacking me. It was my body protecting me. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm so thankful for like the things that lupus has taught me. And so now I take better care of myself. Like, not surface level gratitude. Like, this was so much deeper than that. This was a reconciliation with my inner child. This was recognizing that everything my body did was in response to its environment, and that where I felt I needed to perform and overachieve in order to receive love and care, and also an environment where emotional validation was the norm, like that wasn't my body being broken. It wasn't confused, but that was my body holding everything together for me the entire time. And autoimmune disease, lupus, it was an intentional choice by my body to get the care that I so desperately needed as a child. The reality of the environment I had growing up became really apparent to me last year when I had a second flare-up of kidney inflammation. Back in 2022, when I was struggling through suicidal ideation, it was really difficult for me to receive support from my family. I thought that by sharing about my struggle with them, that they would show up for me, that they would come spend time with me, come help me, just like make an effort to lift me up. But that is not what happened. And last year in 2024, when I had a physical illness, I was in the hospital. They dropped everything and came and sent me presents and brought me flowers. They helped clean up around the house. Like, it was like all the things that I expected when I was struggling with a mental illness, but it only came when I had a physical illness to validate me. And I don't say this to put shame on my family in any way. This is to point out how we as a society still put a lot more validation on physical illnesses than we do on mental illnesses or mental struggles. And that is why our bodies so often resort to physical ailments, because it is a lot easier for us to deal with the physical things than it is to deal with the mental and emotional things. And that is so often why the physical illness that often comes in the form of chronic illness is a needed survival response from the body. And it is also just a lot easier for the people in our lives to support us and help us with a physical ailment than with a mental one, because we continue to believe this narrative that mental health is hard. Not that it's easy, but we continue to believe that emotions are hard, or we just don't know how to deal with it. We don't know what to say, so we all just suffer in silence. But the body doesn't. The body doesn't suffer in silence. The body finds a way to speak. So this is a call for us to start shifting the way that we speak about mental health and stop believing that just because we don't know what to say means that we can't help, when oftentimes just presence is incredibly helpful. Anyways, so again, back to the deck, always going back to the deck. So as I watched high school me lay in that hospital bed, I thanked her. And I said to her that I no longer needed her to protect me, that this version of me, she who is sick, is no longer needed, that I no longer needed to be sick to validate myself, that I could do it without the need for lupus. And I said that she was welcome to finally go and rest and be free. And it was just such a beautiful moment. I watched her just start drift away and fade away. And as she did, she turned into all these little white flowers, and they just drifted away into the wind. And honestly, I will never forget that day, because it was such a special moment that changed everything for me. I realized that the way that I was relating to autoimmune disease was not really aligned with what was true for me. That is why everything else in my life felt so heavy. And I think the constant blaming of my body and living in a way to prove my worth and prove my value was quite literally driving me insane. That day, God showed me that believing this narrative that my body, His creation, was attacking me was not the truth. And it really challenged me to think about, if I believe God is who He says He is, then how can my body, my immune system, act outside of His will and His creation? That has to mean that either God designed my body to attack me, and that is not in alignment with who He says He is, or that autoimmune disease is a part of His design of the body. And if that is true, then autoimmune disease can't be an attack. It has to be a protection. So from that moment forward, I began to change the way I spoke about my experience with autoimmune disease. It was no longer my lupus. I stopped calling the disease mine and started paying more attention to the words that I used in relation to autoimmune disease. Like, I no longer wanted to own that part of me. Not to say I disowned it, but it just no longer made up my identity. Like, lupus was no longer who I was. And I stopped blaming lupus for everything. Like, I stopped saying things like, oh, that's just the lupus, because like I realized how invalidating that actually was to my own body's experience. Like, instead, I started paying attention to how my body felt and started saying, this is the experience my body is having right now. And just that change like eliminated so much resentment that I had for my body. And I started to build a lot more compassion and understanding for my body. And instead of being upset when I had a flare up of symptoms, I got curious, like, because it was no longer my body's doing this to me. It was my body's experiencing something. How can I help? Imagine if we related that way to people. I think the way that we relate to other people also has a huge part in the disease that we experience in our bodies. But I think that is a whole separate part to this, and like just a separate conversation and episode for another day. What really changed that day was my entire identity. Like, lupus, autoimmune, chronically sick was no longer my identity. My mission was no longer to raise awareness about the disease, but now the mission was to raise awareness about the body's healing capacity. Because all of the symptoms we experience are just responses to the environment that we live in, the environment around us, and the environment between our ears. What I didn't realize that day was that identity, she who is sick, had really been the one holding down everything. And I mean, like, literally holding down like all the emotions that I had learned to repress. So what I thought was like this beautiful healing experience, which it was actually this like uncovering, like unraveling of this whole body full of emotions that were ready to be heard. So that beautiful life-changing moment was really just like opening the lid to some of the toughest years of my life. I was really not prepared for such a rush of childhood memories that came after that. And it's not that they came up and I just like suddenly remembered all of these things, which I know does happen to people. But for me, I've always had a recollection of my childhood memories in my childhood, but for the first time, I just understood them differently. And my goodness, was I angry. I felt so much anger. And I think like in just a couple of weeks after I had that just beautiful ceremony and said goodbye to sick Daniela, like I met angry Daniela. I remember I was journaling on my couch, and I finally admitted to myself, like, yeah, I have a lot of anger about these things. And it was just like another vision. Like I saw her, she who is angry, just sitting in like the corner chair, just like engulfed in flames. And I look at her and she said, "Is it my turn yet?" And I was like, oh my gosh, like I still like get so many chills about that moment. And let me be clear, these are not hallucinations. I'm like wasn't on any drugs. These were just like parts of myself revealing themselves to me, which it wasn't until this year actually that I learned that this is actually a technique in therapy called internal family systems, which like views the mind as like naturally made up of like these different parts, kind of like an inner family, so to speak, that they all work together to create harmony and like bring balance to understand and heal the protectors that have been shunned as exiles. So like all the emotions that we deem as like negative are actually really protectors. So the internal family systems like aims to like bring in all the parts of us, even like the parts that we were like taught to hate, and like we learn to understand their role in protecting our nervous system, and seeing how like those negative parts of us are actually really helpful, and we start to integrate them into who we are and how we interact with the world and people around us. So I just like over the last several years, as I have like unraveled these identities and like met these different versions of me, I didn't know that it was called internal family systems. But this year I realized like, oh, I've just been doing therapy with myself this whole time. So yeah. All right. So we meet angry Daniela, and actually I'm going to pause there. I thought that I was going to like do it all in one episode and share like all the different versions of me. But while I was like creating the outline for this episode, I realized that this is actually quite longer than I anticipated. And I think that it would be just better to do it in 2 parts, maybe 3. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, this is me unraveling like 4 years of experiences. So just no way that I can put it all into one episode. And I think it'll just make it easier to like digest. So in this first episode, we met sick Daniela, she who is sick. And I just introduced angry Daniela, she who is angry. So these are the identities that I have started to peel back. So I'm going to kind of like be working from the outside in. So I'm going to leave you there. I hate to leave you on a cliffhanger, but there is more to come. Thank you so much for listening into this episode. Like I said in the beginning, this episode is very special, very vulnerable, as will be the episodes to come in this series. So thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, please let me know if you found this helpful in any way. All right. Until next time, my friends, be well.